Now we're going to jump right into a panel discussion about recovery in King County. And joining us for this discussion will be King County Recovery Coalition Director, Heather Venegas. There she is. Welcome, Heather. Substance Use Disorder Certified Clinician, Marco Sari. Welcome. And Peer Seattle Director, Christopher Archiapoli. Moderating this panel will be a local realtor and person in recovery, Catherine Lizecki. So welcome.
Thank you. Okay, hopefully we're moving that podium, huh? Awesome. Well, thank you, John, and thank you for this illustrious panel of recovery leaders and everyone for joining us today. I'm really excited to be here. Let's get right into the discussion, shall we? So as someone in recovery myself, I always find connecting with people based on their passion for recovery is important. For me, as I said, it is deeply personal. I knew that I had a problem when I was really young in my drinking career, probably around the age of 10, 11 years old. And it led me into a lot of trouble with the law. At one point, a judge had required me to go to AA meetings. I was also looking at a prison sentence at one point. I spent time in a treatment facility, and then I also lived in a sober recovery home. And even with all of that, even with all of those resources, I unfortunately still didn't stay sober. And it wasn't until later when I had the courage and the willingness to actually make the decision to change that I knew where to go. And that was because all of those resources existed. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about recovery. I also think that the more that we speak about it, the more that we educate people within the community about recovery, we can help lessen the stigma, making it less scary to actually seek help when you need it. So I'd love to hear from you all about your passion for recovery as well. Heather, let's start with you.
Thank you. So I'm Heather Venegas, and I'm a woman in long-term recovery. And what that means for me is last week on Cinco de Mayo, I celebrated 29 years of continuous recovery from drugs and alcohol. Now, that wasn't my first rodeo. It wasn't the first time I tried to get into recovery. I started using at 13 years old, and I used for 10 years. By the time I finished, I was diagnosed a late-stage chronic alcoholic. In the next 10 years, I strung together some recovery, and I relapsed. I got migraines, and I got prescribed a whole bunch of opioids and other pills. I went to treatment 7 times, inpatient, outpatient. I was on Antabuse. I was on Trexan, and I did methadone. I'm also somebody that overdosed and used the same afternoon. My passion for doing this work is twofold. One, I want people to experience the incredible gifts that my recovery has brought to me. I have an entirely different life today, and I have a daughter who's never seen me loaded. I also have lost many loved ones to this disease. 2 best friends, sponsees, parts of our recovery community, so many during COVID. My second best friend, Lisa, was a prima ballerina with the San Francisco Ballet. When I knew her, she was the vice president of a Seattle area bank. We did meetings together. We were in a step group together. We went to women's retreats and conventions together. And when we both got diagnosed with hepatitis C, we did interferon treatment together. When I got married in my recovery, Lisa was my maid of honor, and she was my daughter's godmother. And then Lisa relapsed and couldn't make it back into the rooms, back into recovery, and string more than a few months together. I went on a trip with several people in recovery and came home and found out that Lisa had died while I was gone. And she was outside somewhere and she was found dead. And I do this work so that no one else has to lose their Lisa. So that one day, all of our loved ones, all of our children, all of our parents, all of our coworkers and colleagues and recovery community friends get to stay. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Marcos, what about you? Will you share with us your passion?
First off, I'd like to not remove, I'm grateful for it, but the title, Substance Use Disorder Professional, I do hold 4 credentials total, but I'm not really about them. I'm grateful that I ended up able to go after and getting them. But as far as passion, I'm with Heather. As an individual in long-term recovery, looking back as yourself, as the little kid, it was clear. It was clear to my mother, myself, that I had some issues. Unfortunately, AA was not attractive, and it was not the thing. I mean, I was 13, and a bunch of guys with big old belly, no hair, glasses, gray hair, big old belly, no hair, but the still not happening with AA. Just kidding. So, passion, mental health, trauma, broken families. And we even have a name for them nowadays, social determinants of health. All of that, resulted in having to find in an early age that it was made clear to me that I had some issues. So my passion at some point was desperation, though. My early 20s, I realized as well that I could not go on. And a little bit of institutions and all the, multiple trips to treatment and so forth. Some people saw something, little Marcos and young Marcos. And I just want to make sure that families and other individuals get a chance to install that on our youth. And at this point, I'm not just about the youth, but the families, the communities, and so forth and so on. And I'm afraid of that. I'm seeing a mix of professionals, mothers, families, advocates, sisters, brothers in recovery, loved ones, so that's the passion. And it is not a passion, this is just a lifestyle. That is what we do. Give some hope and give back what was given to me. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, many of us, we do recover, and recovery has a rippling effect within our community. That was very well said. And Christopher, will you share with us?
Hello. Oh, thank you. Sure, thank you. So I'm here because harm reduction saved my life. I think that acknowledging that there's multiple paths to recovery, acknowledging that there's more than one way to get here is really important. I spent way too long in active addiction because of a lack of resources, because of a lack of options. Statistically and sort of societally, 12-step recovery is pretty much all that's out there. It's really hard to access other types of services. And there's nothing wrong with 12-step. It saved a lot of lives. It's for a lot of people. But it didn't work for me, and it doesn't work for a lot of people. And so I spent a lot of time out there looking for something else. And it wasn't until I came upon Peer Seattle, which was Seattle Area Support Groups, which was Seattle AIDS Support Groups before that, that my life started moving forward. And so my connection is really about making sure that people have access to multiple different types of services, educating people about those types of services, in particular, making sure that marginalized communities have access to those types of services. Peer Seattle has a LGBTQIA2S+ sort of focus, but our BIPOC communities, in particular, our trans and gender nonconforming members, there is just not enough access to resources. And I'm passionate about removing the shame, removing the stigma, removing the attitude that our society takes towards addiction.
Yes, absolutely. Amen to that. Many of us know that 90% of people with a substance use disorder never seek treatment. And as someone on the front lines, love to hear what is a way that we can help more people see that recovery is possible. So we're going to switch things up. Marcos, let's start with you.
Not to say that I'm taking anything back, right, about 12 steps, because I'm a 12-stepper myself. And I told the table AA, without AA, there will be no NA. And I owe my life to the fellowship of NA. But just like Christopher mentioned, it's clear to me that it's not just one pathway. And whether I'm talking to Denise, I'm talking to Tammy, or I'm talking to whomever, it has to be flipped, and it has to be, I'm not fake by no means, but I'm an open-minded individual. And whether it's Espanol, English, whatever that is, I will be open, to provide you with resources. Even when it doesn't look that way, I'm talking about the pathway, right? If it's not the same as I came, if it's not the same door, I'm rooting for you. And trust me, I've gained knowledge and information. I continue to do so in order to help others and provide the hope. It's not necessarily 12-step, right? And I understand if MAT is what's needed, if it's faith-based is what's needed, whatever that is, I'm open to it, and I'll support you. Also, I don't know if I'm answered the question, but that's what I'm about, really.
I think that's great. So thank you for that. And then Christopher, what do you think? How can we help more people see that recovery is possible?
I think we need to change the narrative around how addiction is conveyed and displayed in our culture. Every news story that you see is all about how dirty drug use is. It's these demonized pictures of people who are unhoused in downtown Seattle, huddled in an alleyway. And that's not what addiction is. Addiction hits every demographic. It hits every person. We are all impacted by it. But the way that our society portrays that really makes it look as if it is othered. It makes it look as if people don't belong in society. And I think we need to change that narrative before we can change anything else.
Thanks, Christopher. And Heather, what do you think?
I love what Marcos and Christopher said, and I would just add to that we need to make recovery visible. Just like Christopher said, we see a lot of focus on someone in addiction and that photo op, especially in the media. We don't see a lot of stories about people in recovery that are turning their lives around and are showing up as politicians, as nonprofit leaders, as teachers, as mothers, as, everything in our community. And so part of the work that we do is we make recovery visible. Sharing training on how to become a recovery advocate, like Ryan talked about earlier, about going and sharing our story with lawmakers and asking them to support behavioral health services and funding. We gather together in August at T-Mobile Park for a recovery day at the Mariners. Last year, we had over 2,500 people support our recovery event there. We had people in recovery throwing and catching the first pitch that were youth in recovery. Sharing pro-recovery stories in the media and everywhere that we can is vital. It gives hope. It shows that recovery is possible. And like Lauren said earlier, so many people don't even know that they can or that they're worth it. And the truth is we're all worth it. So King County Recovery Coalition is proud to announce today that we have launched King County Recovery Conversations, a new podcast that drops in July. We'll be sharing people's recovery stories. We'll be talking about pathways to recovery. We'll be talking about recovery services and different aspects of that individual's story. And I invite you to contact me if you know someone who has a great story, or if you're someone that's connected to a service or a pathway of recovery. I want to get you on. Let's get these conversations heard. Let's make recovery visible.
Thank you, Heather. All right, the next question I have is, if you had the ear of those in power, I'm just kidding. What is one aspect of recovery that you wish was supported financially or otherwise at a higher rate? So let's start, Christopher, let's start with you.
Well, I work in recovery support services, so I'm going to go with that. But, to expand on that, everything that there's a lot of emphasis placed, like Lauren was saying earlier, there's a lot of emphasis placed on the outreach and the treatment side of things. But, after someone goes to treatment, what do we do to support their recovery? What are we doing to keep people connected to the tools that they've gained through treatment? If they don't have any support coming out, then chances are they're just going to go back. I think Councilmember Dunn at the beginning said the opposite of addiction is connection. If we don't build community around people, then the rate of relapse is much higher.
Definitely. Heather, what about you?
I have to second what Christopher said. For me, really, the thing that is the top of my list is building that safety net for people coming out of treatment, if they're lucky enough to go there, or who have found another pathway into recovery and are trying to live a different way of life. The statistics show that when we wrap those services around someone, that they can and do recover. If we can have that, first several years of somebody's journey be just solid in the foundation they're building, change is possible. And so that includes things like recovery housing, supported employment and education, peer support services, childcare, all the different things that we can do to help someone stay once they've made this incredible, courageous choice in their life. I mean, if you think about it, when someone gets cancer or diabetes and goes to the hospital for treatment or surgery or whatever their story is, we don't just send them out the door and say, see ya. We have support groups. We have all kinds of classes and things that we surround them with to help them on that journey. People who go into treatment and stop and lay down alcohol and drugs still have all that trauma and all the pain on all the wounds and fear and everything they had before they stopped, except now they have no coping mechanism. It's vital that we wrap everything we can around them to help them stay.
Yeah. Thank you, Heather. Marcos, will you share with us?
So I'm gonna go back to California again and just reminiscing on this thing that we did early on. I say we did. My then fiance, now wife, south of Oakland in Hayward, California, there was a Puerto Rican church, and somehow through the sponsor of mine, I got involved in service with them. And I fell in love with the concept of the little house that was at the corner. This area was gang infested and a lot of drug use and what have you. But it was a beautiful thing to see. All those homeless and nasty people fresh out of prison coming there, getting a shower, getting a meal, getting tested for Hep C, getting tested for HIV. And the church with it, and at the same time you have the youth group running their thing next door and whatever is going on here, but you have the faith base, you have 12 steppers, you have the public health department, and you have some professionals and individuals as myself in community, no stigma, no none of that. Unfortunately, nowadays what I get to see, because I'm blessed with the ability to move throughout the county from, and I'm talking about Pierce County, King County, That'd be Lakewood, that'd be Tacoma, that'd be Puyallup, that'd be Federal Way, that'd be Kent, Maple Valley, Seattle, South Park, you name it, South End. There are different flavors to it, and it's all about politics. So I think we need to do some work. We talk about showing others how recovery is possible, but it's more to get to those places where the decisions are being made. And really, I don't know if it's about education or what's going to take, but it's going to take a miracle to get us into a place like the one that was happening at Campo Ramos in Hayward, California, right? I'm not comparing apples to apples, what have you, but the concept was a beauty. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful thing. It was, to me, I realized that's humanity, and that's what I need to be doing. And it hasn't changed. Like I said a minute ago, I don't care. I'm down. So,
All right, so Councilmember Dunn had asked this question in the fireside chat before on that panel, but in sticking with the theme of addiction and more is more, I believe that we should also ask it now. That was sort of a joke on the play that like, you can never get enough, right? Anyways, I think it's a very, very important question. And so I'd love to hear from you all, especially those joining us in person and virtually. It might have an impact for them. If you had someone that you were close to that was struggling with substance use disorder, what would be something that you could say to help them see that recovery is an option? So let's start with Heather.
First off, I would say that you're worth it and that I believe in you and that I know that as long as you're breathing and above ground, that there's hope, that recovery is possible, and I support you. And whatever your pathway is, if you've tried one before and you didn't like it or it didn't work, try another one. Keep going. Don't give up. And I love you.
Yeah, absolutely. Marcos, what would you tell someone who's struggling with the substance use that would show them that recovery is possible?
being in recovery and getting the education and those credentials is like, man, it is a trip. And it's, I would say conflict, because I'm a strong believer that, hope and love. But in between being in the field of substance use disorder treatment and getting a taste of mental health disorder therapy and so forth and so on, I learned one thing. The thought of how we go on the meetings, you work the steps or diet, MF, whatever. So I've learned throughout the years that that's not necessarily the case with a lot of people. With a lot of people, you just love them. And Lauren mentioned earlier, you meet them where they at, but you just don't leave them where they at. And you don't get to see the change from the end result within a month, within a year, within 2 years. It might take longer than that. And it might be something different than what you expect. And it's a reality, because I deal with that within family, neighbors, sponsees, within the community, families that I consult and so forth and so on. But the one thing that I do personally, if you ask me for help, I'm somewhat healthy, and I really get my own counsel and it might support my mentoring, because I can become codependent, but I will not give up on you. I will not give up on you. And if you want to really cut me off, you better block me or change your number, because that's where it's at. What it was done daily or when we were good, and then it changed to where we're not so good because whatever decisions, I'm still checking up on people and following up and not giving up. And at times I get the answer, and at times it will be a month or two. I'm not a creep, right? I'm not going to be stalking you, but I do not give up. Literally, I don't.
That's awesome. And then Christopher, what do you think?
Well, if someone was asking me for advice, I would ask them first, when's the last time someone said something to you that made you change a behavior? I think that it's important that we stop trying to talk at people and telling people what they need and start asking them what they need. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk with somebody. Chances are, if you're trying to support a family member or loved one who's battling addiction, you may not have experience in that yourself. And even if you do have your own lived experience, you don't have their experience. You don't know what they need. So I think that, we like to treat things as a binary in our society. We like to say you're either, in addiction or you're in recovery. You're either using or you're not. But there's a lot of different paths to that, like I said at the beginning. And until we really understand why people are doing what they're doing, what their behavior looks like, and figuring out solutions in conjunction with them and in participation with them, then we're not actually going to be providing any solutions.
Wonderful, thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. So let's see here. What is something good you have recently seen that the government has done either in Washington or outside that gives you hope? Ending on a high note. Christopher, you take it away.
The government gives hope. No, I'm not gonna. I don't. The government doesn't give me hope. I'll just be honest. I think locally, yes, we see some changes, and I think we see some wonderful things. But the hope that I see is what I get to do every day. The people that give hope in our community are the people doing the work. I get the great satisfaction of going to work every day at a peer-led, peer-run organization. Everyone that I worked with has lived experience, including myself. I am a person in long-term recovery from crystal meth addiction. I was an IV user. That's like the dirtiest of the dirtiest, and I get to see hope every day from the people that I work with.
It's so powerful. Absolutely. Heather, what about you? Anything that the government has done that gives you hope?
Yes, there is something the government as well. All of us have done that's giving me hope, which is that we passed the Crisis Care Centers levy. I'm so excited to see how all of this blesses our community. I'm just really grateful that it passed and that we're going to get to have those centers and restore the 111 beds that we lost and pay our workforce what they deserve and have peers all throughout all of it.
Absolutely. And then what about you, Marcos?
That is a tough one, but I do have to acknowledge that we evolve in a society. We get to understand now that we need to go beyond the ICD-10 and DSM-5 in order to make a service billable. We have people dying, we have people suffering, and it's not getting any better. But finally, individuals in those places where decisions are being made are listening. And I think we finally moving on the right direction because there are tons of amazing people out in the community. And whether you want to name them recovery coaches, peer support, what have you, there are family members, there are tons of things being done by individuals that unfortunately we don't get to see an increase of those services because they're not tied up to the ICD-10, to the DSM-5, and so forth. So they're not billable, they don't get any compensation for. So that's ridiculous. We cannot do it alone. That's the hope that I'm seeing, that finally people paying attention. Lawmakers are paying attention, but it's taking a little too long. So I'm hopeful that we're going to be moving a little faster, right? Because that makes a huge difference. That makes a huge difference.
Awesome. Well, I think all of your answers are incredibly helpful and beneficial, and I hope they were beneficial to those that are here and those that are watching. But we have come to the end of our time, so I want to thank Christopher, Heather, Marcos for their time and sharing their knowledge with us. Thank you.